Millionaire CEO slapped his own son, not knowing, until she returned with the truth. In the heart of Manhattan's glittering skyline stood Wolfe Dynamics, a fortress of glass, steel, and ambition. It was the empire of Grayson Wolfe, a man whose name echoed in boardrooms, headlines, and high society whispers. At 30, he had built a billion-dollar tech empire from inherited wealth and ruthless intellect. He was the kind of man people envied, feared, and admired, but never truly loved. With ocean blue eyes that sliced through boardroom silence and long, midnight black hair that defied the stiff image of most CEOs, Grayson looked more like a movie star than a businessman. But beneath that beauty was an ice-cold heart, one that believed love was just a weakness and kindness a liability. His world was made of numbers, contracts, and one-night stands. Grayson didn't do relationships, he did transactions. Whether it was acquiring a company or seducing a woman, everything had its purpose. His gain. Emotions were messy. Attachments were traps. He told himself that often. Told it so many times it became a law he lived by. He had built walls so high around his heart, even he forgot what lay behind them. Every morning he woke up in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in golden light, but it never warmed him. His sheets were Egyptian cotton, his suits Italian silk, and his life meticulously curated. His personal assistant, Valerie, arrived every morning at 6:30 sharp with a protein smoothie and a schedule booked to the second. This morning was no different. At least it wasn't supposed to be. He slipped into the driver's seat of his matte black Aston Martin, the engine purring like a wild cat beneath his fingers. Same route, same destination, same life, he muttered to himself as he pulled out of the underground garage. Traffic was a minor inconvenience to him. His cars, like his time, could clear lanes. As he made a right turn onto Fifth Avenue, something unusual caught his eye. Not a billboard or a broken-down car. It was human. A scene so out of place in his world that it made him hit the brakes. On the opposite side of the road, a woman was pushing a wheelchair across the crosswalk. A homeless woman sat slouched in the chair, wrapped in thin blankets. In one arm, the young woman balanced a baby, barely a few months old. The other hand gripped the wheelchair tightly, her body shielding both lives from oncoming traffic. The world slowed for Grayson. The morning sun hit her brown skin like bronze, glowing in the chill of spring. Her curly hair bounced against her shoulders as she moved with determined grace. She wasn't just crossing a street. She was protecting. She was surviving. She was beautiful. But it wasn't her beauty that struck him. It was her humanity. Grayson didn't even realize he was staring until a car behind him honked aggressively. He blinked, breaking the trance, and accelerated forward. But something in him shifted. Who was she? That face, that scene. It followed him into the elevator, into the 37th floor, into his corner office that overlooked the very street she'd just crossed. He stood by the window, peering down like a king watching his kingdom. Yet, for the first time, he wondered if his palace was made of glass and emptiness. Valerie knocked gently before entering. "You have a 9 o'clock with the Japan investors." He nodded absently. "Clear my morning." Valerie blinked. "Sir." "Push everything after noon. I need to check on something." He had never done that. Ever. Valerie didn't argue, only nodded before stepping out. Grayson loosened his tie, glanced at his reflection, and walked down to the building's lower level. He passed by departments he never visited, people he never noticed. They all stared in disbelief. Their boss never came down here. Then he stepped into the canteen. It was clean but modest, unworthy of his presence, some would say. The staff paused, stunned into silence. Then she appeared from behind the counter. The same woman, the bronze angel, the street scene in real life. She didn't flinch when she saw him, didn't blush or stammer. Her eyes, deep, earthy, and fierce, met his with calm curiosity. Grayson walked to the counter and ordered a black coffee. "What's your name?" he asked, voice smooth but unusually soft. "Imani," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Imani Brooks." "That's a beautiful name," he said, leaning slightly forward. "You know, you're stunning." Imani gave a soft laugh, not flattered, not nervous, amused. "I know white men often say that to us," she replied. "But I'm not here to entertain compliments. I'm here to work, and I don't play small just because someone in a suit thinks I should blush." Grayson felt the ground shift under him. No one spoke to him like that. But instead of anger, he felt intrigued, stirred. "I'm not playing," he said quietly. She tilted her head. "Neither am I. I was raised by a homeless mother. I worked 3 jobs through college. I've been spit on, overlooked, and underestimated my whole life. So, no offense, but compliments don't faze me. My worth doesn't depend on them." For the first time in years, Grayson Wolfe was speechless. Imani turned away, preparing another customer's order. But the fire in her voice, the steel in her soul, remained behind, echoing in his chest. He took his coffee, but didn't leave right away. He sat in the back, watching her move like poetry in motion, efficient, graceful, grounded. She greeted every customer with respect, helped a janitor with a limp carry his tray, shared a sandwich with the night guard on break. Grayson couldn't stop watching. All his parties, his models, his luxury. None of them ever stirred him the way this woman's compassion did. As he took the last sip of coffee, one question circled his mind like a storm. What if love wasn't a weakness? What if kindness was strength? The sun rose slowly over the glass towers of Manhattan, bathing the city in soft amber hues. For most, it was just another weekday, an endless rotation of alarm clocks, subways, and caffeine-fueled survival. But for Grayson Wolfe, it was the beginning of a personal awakening he hadn't seen coming. Dressed in a sleek charcoal suit with silver cufflinks gleaming at his wrists, Grayson stepped into his Aston Martin with the same precision he brought to his business deals. Another day, another victory to chase. Yet his thoughts wandered, back to that girl from the canteen, Imani Brooks. Her name danced in his mind like a melody he couldn't shake. Her unapologetic strength. The way her eyes didn't lower when she spoke to him. She had ignited something inside him that was still flickering in the shadows of his mind. As his car glided through the morning traffic, his gaze drifted to the sidewalk. Then, just ahead, he slammed the brakes. There she was again. But this time, not behind the counter. Grayson stared. Imani was crossing the street, her arms full with a bundled infant swaddled tightly against her chest. Her other hand gripped the handles of a rusted wheelchair. Seated in it was an elderly woman, grey-haired, frail, her thin coat barely shielding her from the breeze. The baby let out a soft cry. Imani whispered something calming. Then, as cars impatiently waited, she maneuvered the wheelchair over the uneven curb, using her own weight to balance both the child and the woman. The traffic lights hadn't changed, but she didn't wait for permission. She moved with purpose. Fierce. Brave. Grayson's chest tightened. He wasn't sure what it was. Maybe the way her body shielded the others from danger. Maybe the way her eyes scanned the road with urgency. But the moment seared itself into his memory. This wasn't just kindness. It was something deeper. It was protection, compassion, raw courage. She didn't know anyone was watching. She didn't do it for praise. She just did it. And in that moment, Grayson Wolfe, man of marble, of ego, of wealth, felt small. The light turned green. He didn't move. Cars behind him honked and swerved, but he just sat there, stunned. By the time he blinked and pulled forward, she was already at the other side, guiding the wheelchair toward a nearby alleyway, her coat fluttering behind her like a cape. He watched as she handed the woman a thermos, probably tea. She crouched beside her, checked her pulse like she knew what she was doing, adjusted her scarf, and tucked the blanket in tighter around the woman's bony legs. Then she kissed the baby's forehead and stood, smiling softly. And then, just like that, Imani walked away, toward the same building he ruled from the top floor. Grayson followed in silence. He pulled into his private garage, stepped into the elevator, and rode the ascent in silence. But his world, the one he built on power and perception, was trembling. It was like someone had kicked the foundation, and the woman who did it wasn't an heiress. She wasn't an influencer. She wasn't from his world. She was from the basement, the canteen. How many times had he walked past her? How many times had he ignored people like her, deeming them invisible? He stood in front of the elevator mirror and looked at himself. Not the polished billionaire, not the tabloid cover boy, but a man who had never lifted anything heavier than a pen for another human being. A man who'd never held a child, never wheeled someone through traffic, never stopped to see the world beyond his empire. The reflection staring back at him suddenly felt hollow. Back at her station in the canteen, Imani washed her hands and got to work as usual. No one knew what she had done. No one knew how her day had started. But Grayson did. And that made all the difference. Later that day, Grayson found himself peering out his office window, scanning the streets. He didn't see her, but he didn't need to. The image, her silhouette against the sun, her arms full of love and responsibility, was etched into his mind. A living painting of grace under pressure. And he wasn't just moved. He was haunted. The next morning he returned to the same street corner, earlier this time. No suit, just jeans, a coat, and something rare on his face. Curiosity without ego. He waited. And then, like clockwork, she appeared. Not with the baby today, just with the wheelchair. The homeless woman, who he would later learn was named Miss Edna, smiled up at her with eyes that had seen too much. Imani adjusted her scarf again, told a joke that made Edna laugh, and pushed her into the small alley where several others waited for their morning care. Grayson's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a one-time thing. She did this every day. Imani Brooks, the girl from the canteen, was an angel in disguise, a volunteer, a caregiver, a protector, a fighter. And Grayson Wolfe, the man who measured life by the profit margins, realized that he had been blind all along, not just to Imani, but to the gold glinting beneath the surface of the world he thought he ruled. That evening, as he stared at the ceiling in his penthouse, his eyes wandered to the stars outside the glass roof. And for the first time in years, He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel powerful. He felt humbled. And deep in his chest, where ice had reigned for so long, a flicker of warmth sparked. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he knew one thing. It wore the name Imani Brooks, and it shined brighter than anything he'd ever owned. The next morning at Wolfe Dynamics was as polished and punctual as ever. Staff filed in, dressed sharp and moving fast, clutching coffee cups like armor against the cold weight of routine. The sound of heels clicked across marble floors. Laptops booted up, elevators chimed. But Grayson Wolfe was somewhere else. He sat in his high-rise office, staring at the monitor before him, though nothing on the screen registered. His perfectly brewed espresso remained untouched, steam curling up and disappearing into the air, much like his attention span. Imani Brooks. Her name hadn't left his thoughts. That image, her holding the baby, wheeling the elderly woman across traffic, played on a loop in his mind. He didn't know why it affected him so deeply. But the pull was real, and it was growing. Suddenly he stood. He left his office. No assistant, no guards, just him. The CEO walking alone into the elevator, pressing the button for the basement level, a floor he hadn't set foot on in years. The doors opened to the humbler part of his empire. The walls weren't glass. The air wasn't filtered. It smelled of food, sweat, life. The canteen buzzed with early workers grabbing quick breakfasts, cafeteria staff lining trays, and soft chatter between friends on short breaks. Grayson moved through it like a ghost, eyes peeled for her. And there she was. Imani stood behind the counter in a simple navy blue apron and a fitted long-sleeve shirt that hugged her graceful frame. Her brown skin glowed under the soft yellow lighting, and her hair was wrapped in a patterned scarf that complemented her strong features. She was laughing with a co-worker, her hand resting on the countertop, eyes filled with something Grayson hadn't seen in women in his circle for years. Peace. Not the desperate hunger for money or fame, not flirtation for advantage. She looked alive. Real. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me," Grayson said, his voice unusually calm. Imani looked up. Their eyes met. The room dimmed around him. "Coffee, sir?" she asked. Her tone professional, not flirtatious, not warm, just polite. He smiled softly, leaning against the counter like a regular man. Not a king. "Black. No sugar." She began pouring it, wordless. "What's your name?" he asked, not out of habit this time, but genuine interest. "Imani Brooks," she replied, sliding the cup toward him. "Imani," he echoed. "Beautiful name. Thank you. You know," he paused, his eyes holding hers, "you're beautiful too." The moment hung in the air. In the past, compliments from Grayson would open doors, eager smiles, blushed cheeks, invitations. But not this time. Imani's expression didn't falter. Instead, she folded her arms and tilted her head slightly. "I've heard enough white men joke with that line," she said smoothly, her voice sharp, yet not cruel. "But I don't play along. I'm not here to please anyone. I'm proud of who I am." Grayson blinked. The air shifted. There was no venom in her tone, just truth, pure and fearless. "I'm not your fantasy, Mr. Wolfe," she added, meeting his gaze without a shred of submission. "I don't flutter. I don't flatter. I serve coffee, work hard, and go home to a life that I built on my own, and I won't apologize for that." Something cracked open in him. It wasn't humiliation he felt. It was awe. He let out a breathless chuckle, pushing the coffee aside. "I'm not used to hearing that." "Maybe you should be," she said, and turned to the next customer like the conversation never happened. Grayson stood there, stunned and breathless, as someone behind him muttered about the line. But he couldn't move. His world, where women leaned in, where smiles were currency, where compliments bought favor, was burning to ash. And in the middle of that fire stood Imani Brooks, unbothered, unshaken. He returned to his office with more than caffeine. He carried her words like scripture. That night, he stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, wine untouched in his hand, watching the city pulse beneath him. But the glitter didn't impress him any more. Not after today. He remembered her voice, her power, how she'd stared down the wealthiest man in the building without blinking. He wanted to know more, not to conquer her, to understand her, to unearth the fire inside her that the world didn't see. And for the first time in his life, Grayson Wolfe, who had always been surrounded by noise, craved meaningful silence. The next morning, he returned to the canteen. No excuse, no reason, just coffee. Imani gave him the same look, curious, calm. "Back again?" she asked, pouring him a cup. "I figured the office espresso machine isn't worth it anymore," he said, half grinning. She raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you like the taste of being humbled." He smiled wider. "Maybe I do." A pause, then her lips twitched. A tiny smile escaped her guard. "Careful, Mr. Wolfe. That sounds dangerously human of you." And just like that, chemistry sparked between them. Not the fleeting kind, not lust, but recognition. He saw her now, and she saw that he was trying. From that day, he came down every morning, not just for coffee, for her voice, for her presence, for the feeling of being disarmed and rebuilt by a woman who refused to kneel. And Imani, who'd long learned to stand alone, began to notice something rare in his eyes. Not just desire, respect. Something was brewing between them. Strong, dark, bold, just like the coffee. The days turned into weeks. Every morning, Grayson Wolfe appeared at the canteen, like clockwork. No longer just for the coffee. His tailored suits couldn't hide the way he lingered longer by the counter. His blue eyes, once icy and dismissive, now softened when they landed on Imani Brooks. And Imani noticed. At first, she dismissed it, told herself that rich men flirt because they're bored, because it's a game, because they can. But Grayson didn't flirt. He listened. He asked her about her dreams, her favorite jazz records, her late-night book cravings, the stories her mother used to tell her when they were sleeping in shelters. He didn't look at her the way others had, with pity or possessiveness. He looked like a man discovering color after living in grayscale. One evening, just after the kitchen closed, she found him sitting quietly on a bench outside the cafeteria. Not in a rush, not barking orders, just waiting. She paused, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You're not usually here after hours." Grayson stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. "I was hoping to ask you something." Her eyebrow lifted. He hesitated, not from fear, but from the rare experience of vulnerability. "Would you join me for dinner tonight?" Imani laughed softly. "Dinner as in the CEO taking the canteen girl out." "Dinner as in Grayson taking Imani," he replied. That made her pause. Something about the way he said her name, softly, carefully, like it had weight. She studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "One dinner." He smiled, not victorious, but grateful. That evening, a sleek black town car picked her up from the modest apartment she shared with her mother. Imani had worn a fitted emerald dress that hugged her figure without begging for attention. She did her hair in a loose twist-out, framing her high cheekbones, simple gold hoops, and a single chain around her neck. Grayson was waiting for her in the private suite of a rooftop restaurant that overlooked the city skyline. No press, no crowd, just soft candlelight and a jazz trio playing Miles Davis in the corner. He stood when she entered, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. "You look—" He stopped himself, then said sincerely, "like peace." Imani's lips curled into a smile. "Better than looking like a fantasy, huh?" He chuckled, walking over and pulling out her chair. "Much better." They talked. For hours. Over roasted sea bass, warm bread, and wine that sparkled like amber in the candlelight. She told him about her childhood, moving shelter to shelter with her mother, her first job at 14, the nights she studied while others slept, her love for poetry and Nina Simone, the little dreams she never told anyone because life had been too loud for dreaming. He told her about his father, a cold, absent tycoon who only measured success by profit margins. About a mother who left when he was a boy, how he buried his heart in numbers and women he couldn't remember, how he never truly felt anything until the day he saw her crossing the street. "You moved through the chaos like you were made of light," he whispered, his hand resting near hers on the table. Imani looked at him, her eyes glowing. "And you were born in gold, but forgot what warmth feels like." They didn't notice when dessert came, or when the trio packed up and left. The city glittered behind the glass wall, but the only thing shimmering was the air between them. Then he stood, offering his hand. "Dance with me?" "To no music?" she teased. He smiled. "We'll make our own." She placed her hand in his, and in the middle of that empty suite, under soft amber lights, they danced, slow, close, breath sinking to breath. Grayson's arms circled her waist. Imani's hands slid to his shoulders. Their bodies moved in rhythm, hearts pounding quietly between them. And when their eyes met, everything stopped. He leaned in slowly, giving her space to pull back. But she didn't. Their lips met, soft at first, then deeper. A kiss that said more than words ever could. One that asked, "Can I be safe here?" and answered, "Yes." Their bodies found their way to the plush bed in the corner of the suite, not in haste, but in reverence. He kissed her shoulder, her neck, the curve of her back. Every inch of her was honored, not claimed. She ran her fingers through his dark, silky hair, whispering things she'd never said to a man before, things that didn't sound like surrender, but belonging. Their first night together was not about lust. It was healing. He learned the softness of her skin carried strength. She discovered his touch, though powerful, was gentle when it mattered most. And when it was over, they didn't speak. They just laid together, the city lights dancing on the sheets, his hand tracing lazy circles on her back, her head resting on his chest, listening to the beat of a heart that had finally learned to feel. It wasn't the night that changed everything. It was the fact that, for the first time, neither of them wanted to leave in the morning. The city pulsed with anticipation that evening, a brewing thunderstorm crackling above like a secret about to be told. Grayson Wolfe's plans had been meticulous. A rooftop dinner, complete with a string quartet and soft lights, was his way of showing Imani that she wasn't just an afterthought. She was becoming the thought. Imani arrived in a navy blue silk dress that shimmered like water. Her hair was pinned in curls, subtle makeup highlighting the softness in her eyes. She looked like midnight, wrapped in elegance. "You didn't tell me you rented out the entire rooftop," she said, with a sly grin as he guided her to the table. He shrugged, smiling with that signature half-smirk. "I didn't want to share the sky with anyone tonight." Thunder rumbled above, but the stars hadn't disappeared yet. Their dinner was laughter over grilled asparagus, conversation dripping like wine between them. She teased him about his cologne addiction. He admitted to watching romantic comedies in secret. Imani confessed that she still slept with a nightlight. Grayson revealed he hadn't slept without nightmares since he was 10. The storm finally broke mid-dessert. Rain came like a kiss from the heavens, heavy, wet, and unapologetic. Lightning cracked through the skyline, and Imani gasped as a sudden gust sent their napkins flying. Grayson grabbed her hand. "Come on!" Grayson grabbed her hand. "Come on!" They ran, shoes in hand, puddles soaking their feet, wind tangling her curls and pushing his jacket open. He was laughing, actually laughing, not the polished chuckle he gave in meetings, but a raw, boyish sound from deep in his chest. They ducked into the nearest building, a boutique hotel with marble floors and velvet drapes. Soaked, breathless, and dripping, they stood in the empty lobby, eyes locked, clothes clinging to skin. "Should we?" Imani began, brushing water from her face. "Get warm?" he asked, voice lower now. She nodded. Grayson spoke to the concierge, who handed over a key and a knowing smile. The elevator ride to the penthouse was quiet, except for the pounding of their hearts. Inside, the suite was cozy, fireplace lit, soft jazz playing, rich wooden floors beneath Persian rugs. Imani moved to the bathroom, wrapped herself in a thick white towel, and emerged with damp skin and glowing cheeks. Grayson had changed too, wearing a soft robe over his bare chest, hair still damp, clinging to his temples. They sat together by the fireplace, curled in blankets, sipping tea. The world outside was thunder and lightning, but inside was warmth and flickering peace. Then the silence broke. "I've never brought anyone here before," he said, staring into the fire. "Not like this." Imani looked at him. "You mean, without an exit strategy?" He chuckled softly. "Exactly." She took his hand. "What changed?" Grayson paused. "I don't know who I am when I'm with you," he admitted, "but for the first time, I like him." The vulnerability in his voice was real. No corporate shield, no billionaire charm. Just a man, stripped and searching. Imani reached out and cupped his cheek. "You don't have to be who they expect. Be who you want to be." He looked at her like she was the only truth in a world of lies. "I want to be yours," he said, his voice hoarse. The fire crackled. Their blankets fell away. His hand slid to her waist, drawing her close. Her breath hitched as his lips brushed hers, soft at first, then hungrier. This wasn't lust. It was longing. Her towel loosened as his fingers found her skin, warm and electric beneath his touch. She kissed his neck, his jaw, her hands running across the hard lines of his chest. He whispered her name like a prayer. She whispered his like a promise. The rain outside intensified, but they moved slowly, bodies aligning in a rhythm not of urgency, but of need. He carried her to the bed, laid her down like something sacred, kissed the stretch marks on her hip, the curve of her waist, the scar on her left arm she'd gotten in a kitchen fire years ago. "I see all of you," he whispered. And for the first time, Imani didn't feel small. She felt seen. They made love beneath thunder, wrapped in rainlight and silk sheets. It was deeper than desire. It was surrender. Raw, real. Later, tangled together, her head on his chest and his fingers tracing her spine. They talked. He told her about the pressure of being a wolf, that his father had taught him love was weakness, that his childhood was full of gold, but empty of affection. She told him about living with nothing, but still feeling full, because her mother gave her hope. "I wish I grew up with someone like your mum," he murmured, eyes misting. "She would have loved you," Imani said softly. "The real you." Grayson turned, kissed her forehead. "And you?" She looked at him, unblinking. "I think I already do." He inhaled sharply. Outside, the rain slowed. The sky, once angry, had softened into a lullaby. They fell asleep, wrapped in each other, the fire flickering low, the night whispering promises neither of them were ready to say out loud. But in the stillness, one truth remained. This wasn't just the second night. It was the beginning of something they never saw coming. The morning started like any other. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, illuminating the faded linoleum floor. Imani stood at the sink, scrubbing the last of the breakfast dishes, while her mother, Darlene, sorted laundry in the adjacent room. The scent of fresh soap and old memories filled the air. "Hand me that basket, baby," Darlene called, her voice still strong, despite the years that life had etched into her frame. Imani smiled, picking up the wicker basket overflowing with clothes. But halfway across the room, her vision blurred, her knees buckled. "Mama!" she gasped. The basket hit the floor with a loud thump. Imani clutched her stomach, her face contorted in sudden, unbearable pain. Darlene rushed to her side, panic tightening her features. "Imani! Sweetheart! What's wrong?" I don't know. It hurts, Mama. It hurts so bad." Darlene wrapped her arms around her daughter and yelled for the neighbors as Imani's breath came in short, ragged gasps. Minutes later, they were in an ambulance. The sirens screamed louder than the storm outside. Imani lay on the stretcher, whispering prayers between the waves of pain. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Tests, IVs, soft voices laced with urgency. Then came silence. A gentle knock and a smiling young doctor entered. "Miss Brooks, good news. You and the baby are okay." Imani blinked. Baby? "You're about 12 weeks pregnant. Congratulations." The words hit her like a symphony. She sat up slowly, hands instinctively covering her stomach. A baby. Her baby. Tears filled her eyes. Tears of joy, of disbelief, of something too deep to name. "A baby," she whispered. "Grayson's baby." Darlene's eyes widened. Her heart thudded with an emotion that straddled fear and heartbreak. "You're pregnant?" Imani turned toward her mother, nodding through her tears. "Yes, Mama. I didn't know, but now I do. And I'm happy. I really am." Darlene sat beside her, holding her daughter's hand tightly. "Imani, listen to me. This man, Grayson, he's not like us. He's rich, powerful, used to getting what he wants and leaving what he doesn't." "No, Mama," Imani said, her voice trembling but firm. "He's changed. He loves me. He told me he wants a future. He promised." Darlene bit her lip. "Promises are easy, baby. Keeping them? That's the test." But Imani's heart was already soaring. She believed in the nights they'd shared, in the words he whispered, in the way he looked at her like she was the only one in the world. She reached for her phone. "Let me call him." Darlene hesitated but said nothing. Imani dialed his number. Each ring echoed with hope. Finally, he answered. "Yeah?" "Grayson," she breathed, a soft smile curling her lips. I have something to tell you. Something beautiful." He sighed. "I'm in a meeting, Imani. Can we do this later?" Her heart skipped. It's important. More important than anything. There was a pause. I'm serious, she said. Grayson, I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. Silence. She waited. He cleared his throat. Right. Well, I'm going to have to call you back. Click. He hung up. Imani stared at the phone in disbelief. Her fingers trembled. Her smile faded. Darlene stepped closer. What did he say? Imani forced a laugh. He's just busy. He'll call back. He has meetings all the time, you know? But her voice cracked. Her eyes shimmered. She tried to believe. She had to believe. Darlene hugged her close. Sweetheart, I pray I'm wrong. But if he doesn't come through, you will survive this. You are your mother's daughter, and my daughter is made of steel. Imani held her mother tightly, whispering into her shoulder. He loves me, Mama. He does. But outside, the rain returned, and somewhere across the city, Grayson Wolfe stared at his phone, frozen in fear, guilt, and uncertainty. His perfect world now had a crack in it, and it was shaped like responsibility. The sun was just beginning to rise when Darlene stood at the gates of Grayson Wolfe's sprawling mansion. Her heart pounded in her chest, not out of fear, but out of duty. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for her daughter, and for the innocent life now growing inside her. The Wolfe estate loomed like a cold castle before her. Perfectly manicured lawns, silver gates, fountains that roared like pride itself. Darlene clutched her purse tightly. The letter Imani had written folded neatly inside. She was dressed simply but proudly. A mother on a mission. The guard at the gate raised an eyebrow. You got an appointment? No, she said calmly. But tell Mr. Wolfe that Darlene Brooks is here. It's about his child. The guard hesitated, made a call, then, surprisingly, waved her in. 10 minutes later, she stood in the foyer, greeted not by warmth, but by Grayson Wolfe's fury. He descended the staircase like a storm in a tailored suit, his blue eyes burning with disbelief. Who the hell let you in here? Darlene stood tall. I came to speak to you, Mr. Wolfe. Imani is pregnant. With your child. Grayson ran a hand through his flawless hair, pacing. Oh God, is this really happening? She believes in you, Darlene continued, calm but firm. She's planning your future together. She's hoping you'll do the right thing. He turned sharply. The right thing? You mean marriage? Responsibility? All based on a mistake. Darlene flinched, but did not break. A mistake? That's your son or daughter we're talking about. Grayson sneered. This is nonsense. You think this is how you trap me? Some poor girl from the canteen comes crying about a baby and suddenly she's Mrs. Wolfe. The words pierced like knives. Darlene's voice wavered, but she stood her ground. She doesn't want your money. She wants your word, your heart. You gave both. He laughed bitterly. That wasn't real. That was a fling, a distraction. And now you're trying to guilt me into ruining my life. Darlene stepped closer, eyes hard. You already ruined something, my daughter's hope in men. Grayson's jaw clenched. Security. Within seconds, 2 guards entered. Escort this woman out, now. Darlene stood frozen for a beat. Then, with quiet dignity, she turned and walked past the guards. They didn't have to touch her. She didn't give them the satisfaction. Outside, the wind was cold, but not colder than what she'd left behind. Meanwhile, Imani was glowing. She stood in a rented beach house along the golden shore, a small but dreamy place they had once picked from an old magazine together. One day, he had said, we'll wake up to waves every morning. Today was supposed to be that day. Candles flickered. A soft meal was prepared. Simple, home-cooked things Grayson had once said reminded him of peace. Jazz played low. Her fingers brushed the new satin sheets. She'd even bought a tiny onesie, white with silver lettering, Daddy's Dream. She kept checking the time. 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 10 p.m., nothing. She called him, straight to voicemail. Her fingers began to shake. She looked out at the ocean, at the moonlight dancing across the waves, and for the first time in months, doubt crept in. By midnight, the candles had burned to wax puddles. The food had gone cold. Her dress, a soft floral he loved, felt like a costume. She curled up on the couch, tears sliding down her cheeks as she held the onesie to her chest. The silence in the beach house echoed the silence in her soul. She didn't know about her mother's visit. She didn't know she'd been thrown away like yesterday's luxury. But she felt something shift. A bruise on her hope. A crack in her fairy tale. The waves outside the beach house crashed against the shore like thunderclaps against a fragile heart. Imani sat in silence on the vintage leather couch, wrapped in the same cream blanket they had once shared on a night that felt like magic. Her hair, once tied up with care, had fallen loose around her shoulders. The fireplace crackled faintly, offering warmth to a woman growing colder by the minute. The only sound in the room, aside from the ocean's sorrowful rhythm, was the ticking of the silver wall clock. Each tick, a memory. Each tock, a betrayal. On the small table beside her sat 2 empty wine glasses. She had poured his favorite red, just in case. The cork lay beside it, like a wounded promise. "We'll come here when we're old," he had once whispered. "You'll be reading poetry to me on this porch," she had teased. "And you'll still be the most beautiful woman in the world," he replied. Her fingers traced the armrest slowly, eyes glassy with the ghosts of what once was. Flashback. It was 3 months ago. The same beach house, but a different world. Grayson had held her in his arms by the flickering light of the fire. Her head was on his chest, his fingers combing through her curls. "I never thought I could feel this. Full," he had murmured. She looked up at him. "Full?" "Yeah," he'd said, smiling slightly. "Not with money. With you." He had kissed her then, soft and slow, like he was memorizing her soul. They danced barefoot in the kitchen, giggling like teenagers. He had burnt the popcorn, she had spilled hot cocoa, and they both ended up lying on a blanket by the fire, tangled in each other, whispering silly dreams into the darkness. "I want 3 kids," he had said. 2, she replied. "And a dog." He laughed. "2 it is, but I get to name 1. Only if it's not something ridiculous like Wolfe. They had laughed so hard the neighbors knocked, back to present. Now there was only silence, no dancing, no cocoa, no Grayson. Imani's hand instinctively rested on her stomach. A small flutter, like a tiny kick. Her child was growing, alive, holding on, even when his father had let go. She whispered to her belly, voice cracking. "It's just us now, little one. But I promise, I will love you enough for both of us." The onesie lay on the counter still. Daddy's Dream in faded silver lettering. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away. But she also couldn't look at it anymore. The hours crawled. She checked her phone again. Still no calls, no texts, nothing. She tried one last time. Voicemail. "Hey, it's me. I'm at the beach house. I waited for you. I thought maybe you forgot, or something came up. I cooked. I wore the dress you love. I even brought the wine. She stopped. A breath. A sob. I'm pregnant, Grayson. I need you. I still believe in you, please." She hung up, her chest heaving. The silence that followed felt final. She curled into the couch, clutching her stomach, and for the first time cried not because he hurt her, but because she finally believed he wasn't coming back. Outside, the moon rose higher. The tide came closer to the shore. The world kept turning. But inside the beach house, a woman sat heartbroken, abandoned, and still holding on to a dream that had turned ice cold. A night that was once filled with love, now belonged to grief. And yet, somewhere deep in her soul, a flame still flickered. Not for him, but for herself, and for the tiny heartbeat she now carried. The sky outside the small city hospital was a pale grey, as if even the heavens were unsure whether to cry or shine. Inside, in a modest delivery room with flickering fluorescent lights and the dull hum of machines, Imani Brooks was in labour. Her hand gripped the edge of the bed, knuckles white with pain. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Tears welled in her eyes, but not from the contractions. He wasn't here. He wasn't coming. But she wouldn't let that break her. "Breathe, baby. Breathe," her mother Darlene whispered, holding her hand with fierce tenderness. "You're almost there." With one final scream, a mix of pain, power, and release, Imani brought life into the world. A baby's cry pierced the silence. Her world changed in an instant. "It's a boy," the nurse said gently, placing the tiny bundle in Imani's arms. She looked down at him, red-cheeked, eyes barely open, fists curled like a fighter, ready for life. And in that moment, Imani smiled. For the first time in weeks. Not because she forgot the betrayal, not because the pain vanished, but because this child, this beautiful innocent boy, was hers. "My son," she whispered, cradling him close. "My Liam." There was no fancy nursery, no silver spoons, no Wolfe estate to welcome the child. Instead, Liam was brought home to Darlene's small apartment in a worn-down neighborhood where pipes leaked and the floorboards creaked. But love filled every corner. Imani didn't wait for pity or help. She rose. Even before the stitches healed, she was filling out job applications. When one job wasn't enough, she found two. When her body screamed for rest, she whispered to herself, "One more hour. Just one more." She cleaned offices in the early mornings, served food in diners during the day, and did online certifications at night. She took Liam to daycare in a second-hand stroller. She packed him lunches with fruit even when money was tight. She never missed a parent meeting, even if it meant skipping meals. She read him bedtime stories in the same dress she worked in. She sang lullabies with tired eyes and a full heart. Years passed. Liam grew strong, and so did she. Imani's name began to spread in her neighborhood, not as the girl who got abandoned by the millionaire, but as the woman who rose. She organized weekend food drives for single mothers. She tutored young girls who thought college was out of reach. She turned her pain into purpose. People whispered her name with admiration. Young women looked at her and saw possibility. Elderly women looked at her and saw hope reborn. Imani Brooks, once a canteen worker and a forgotten lover, had become a warrior. One evening, as she tucked Liam into bed, he looked at her with wide brown eyes and asked, "Mommy, where's my daddy?" The question stabbed like a blade, but she smiled. "He's not with us, baby," she said softly. "But you have me, and I have you, and that's more than enough." He hugged her tightly. "You're my hero. Her tears fell onto his small shoulder. "You're mine, too." She stood by the window that night, watching the city lights blink in the distance. Grayson Wolfe was out there somewhere, still rich, still powerful. But he had no idea what he had lost, no idea what he had left behind. She held Liam's tiny drawing in her hands, a stick figure of her with a cape flying above the clouds. "Super Mommy," it read in shaky crayon letters. Imani smiled. She didn't have diamonds or silk gowns, but she had something more powerful than any luxury, a legacy. A son who would grow up knowing strength didn't come from wealth, but from will. And a story that would remind every woman who'd ever been left behind that she could rise anyway. The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks over the worn pavement of the community park, just across from Wolfe Dynamics' towering headquarters. Laughter rang through the air, carried by the wind like the echo of forgotten joys. A little boy with wild brown curls, a contagious laugh, and eyes full of innocent wonder chased a soccer ball with 3 other kids. Liam Brooks, 4 years old, fearless and filled with fire. "Pass it, Liam," one of the boys shouted. He kicked it hard, his tiny foot connecting with joy and adrenaline. The ball soared past the makeshift goal and bounced once, twice, and then crack, the unmistakable shattering of glass. A parked matte black McLaren, the pride of Wolfe Dynamics' CEO, had its front windshield splintered like a spiderweb. Everything stopped. The boys froze. The laughter vanished. Security guards from across the street stormed over like a tidal wave of power and rage. "You little brat," barked the first guard, grabbing Liam by the collar of his hoodie. He slapped the child across the cheek. Liam gasped, stumbled back, and fell onto the pavement. His tiny palms scraped. His lip quivered. But he didn't cry. Not yet. Then came Grayson Wolfe, tall, impeccably dressed, rage written across his sharp features. He stormed to his car, staring at the damage. His prized machine violated. His eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on the boy. "You did this." Liam nodded slowly, without thinking, without pausing. Slap, harder than any child should ever bear. The gasp from nearby parents was immediate. Liam's small body rocked from the blow. His cheek turned red, swelling. Tears flooded his eyes now, not from pain, but confusion. "Call your father," Grayson barked. "Right now. I want him to see the damage his little delinquent caused." Liam stood, legs shaking, dust on his knees, a tremble in his voice. I don't have one." Grayson's expression didn't change. "I only have a mother," Liam continued, now louder. "And she's not rich like you. But she loves me." A silence cut through the crowd like lightning. Grayson blinked. Something strange stirred in his chest. The boy, those eyes, that mouth, the way he clenched his fists. It was like looking into a mirror from years ago. Inside Wolfe Dynamics, whispers began. The CEO just hit a kid with eyes that looked familiar. One of the guards leaned toward Grayson. "Sir, the mother's been called. She's on her way." Grayson barely heard him. His heart was pounding. Something about that child, that face, that name. "What's your name, boy?" Liam wiped his nose. Liam Brooks. The name was a punch to the gut. Brooks, Imani Brooks. Number, it couldn't be. Grayson stumbled back a step, hands trembling. The pieces crashed together in his mind. The timelines, the name, the boy's skin, his face. His silence was shattered by a voice from behind the crowd. Liam!" Everyone turned. Imani pushed through, breathless, panic in her eyes. She fell to her knees and scooped her son into her arms. "Are you okay? Oh my God, your face." Liam buried his face in her neck. "Mummy, he hit me." She looked up. Their eyes met. Grayson. Imani. 4 years of silence collapsed in one agonizing heartbeat. She stood, slowly, holding Liam close. "You?" Her voice cracked. "You hit my child." Grayson's voice failed him. His lips moved, but nothing came out. "You have all this money, all this power. And still, you haven't changed." Her eyes were aflame. "You think you can hit a child? Do you know who he is?" He swallowed. "Imani, I didn't know." "Didn't know." Her voice rose. "You think that excuses it?" Grayson's voice was barely a whisper. He's mine." Liam turned his tear-streaked face toward him. "What did you say?" Imani demanded. Grayson stepped closer, eyes on the boy. "He's mine, isn't he?" Imani's entire body stiffened. The crowd was silent. The guards didn't move. She took a step back. "Don't you dare call him yours." "Imani, I didn't know. You knew what you did," she said. "You knew when you hung up on me. You knew when you told your guards to throw my mother out. You knew when I waited for you. And you never came." Tears fell freely down her face now. "You don't get to call him yours. You gave up that right when I was alone in that hospital bed, screaming his name into the air, hoping he'd show up." Grayson fell to his knees, helpless. "Lost. I was scared," he whispered. "I was stupid, but I want to fix this." "Fix?" she said bitterly. "There is no fixing this. There's just a boy who needs safety, and a man who was supposed to be one." Liam clutched his mother tightly. Grayson looked up at them both, his former love and his son. 2 worlds he could have had. 2 hearts he had crushed. "I'll do anything," he begged. "Please, just give me a chance." Imani's lips trembled. Her voice was cold. "Final. We don't need your chances." And with that, she walked away. But Grayson Wolfe, for the first time in his life, felt a different kind of hunger. Not for power, not for wealth, but for redemption. The silence was deafening. Imani stood just beyond the crowd, her eyes wide, her heart in her throat, her heels clicking against the pavement as she sprinted toward her son. Liam. Her soul recognized his cry before her ears ever did. She pushed past stunned onlookers and security guards who suddenly remembered how to move. "Liam!" The child turned, still trembling, tears streaking down his face, his tiny lip trembling. "Mom!" he sobbed, racing into her arms. Imani knelt and wrapped him tightly, shielding him from the world, with the ferocity only a mother possessed. She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his tiny hands, inspecting the red marks that marred his baby-soft skin. "Who hit you?" she demanded gently, trying to calm her panic as she cradled his head. "Baby, what happened?" Liam pointed, voice small. "That man! Him!" He pointed at the man in the tailored suit. The man she once trusted with her heart. Grayson Wolfe. Imani's head snapped up, and there he was. Tall, pale, shaken. Those ocean-blue eyes she used to dream about were now wide with horror, locked on Liam. His lips parted slightly, like he was trying to breathe underwater. Imani stood slowly, still clutching Liam, her body shaking, but not from fear, from rage, from disbelief. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. Grayson stumbled forward, lips trembling. "I didn't know. You hit him," she spat. "You hit a 4-year-old child. I thought he was just... He broke the windshield. I didn't..." Slap! Her hand connected with his cheek before she realized she'd moved. The sound cracked like thunder through the stunned crowd. He didn't flinch. She stared at him, tears brimming in her eyes, fists clenched at her sides. And then it happened. Grayson looked at Liam again, truly looked. The wild curls, the soft skin, the jawline, the eyes, those unmistakable blue eyes. His eyes. Grayson's breath caught in his throat, and then came the words he never thought he'd say. He's mine, isn't he? The entire world seemed to pause. Imani's face twisted with disbelief. What did you just say? I see it now, Grayson whispered, stepping back like he'd seen a ghost. The eyes, his mouth. God, I didn't know. Imani wrapped her arms protectively around Liam. You don't get to say that. You don't get to realize now. Where were you when I called you from the hospital? When I begged you to listen? I was scared, he said, voice breaking. I didn't know how to. You didn't want to know, she snapped. You shut me out. You humiliated my mother. You left me alone. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. Liam looked between the two adults, confused and scared. Mum, who is he? Imani crouched down, heart breaking. He's no one you need to worry about, baby. Come on, let's go home. But Liam pulled back. He said I'm his son. Grayson dropped to his knees. His hands shook as he reached towards the boy. I am, he said, voice cracking. I think I am. Imani, please. Don't, she whispered. You've done enough. Grayson looked at Liam, desperation in his voice. I didn't know you existed, but now that I do, I want to know you. I want to be part of your life. Liam's head tilted. Why do you hit me then? Grayson crumbled. Because I'm a broken man who made a terrible mistake, and I'll never forgive myself. Imani stood. You're too late, Grayson. No, he said, scrambling to his feet. I can make this right. I want to make this right. I want to be a father. A father, she echoed with bitter laughter. Do you know what being a father is? It's changing diapers in the dark. It's holding him through fever nights. It's scraping together every dollar when I was working double shifts so he could have new shoes. Her voice cracked. It's being there, and you weren't. Grayson fell silent. Liam clung to her hand tightly. His eyes never left Grayson's face. I'll never walk away again, Grayson whispered. Even if you never forgive me, I'm going to prove I'm not the man I was. Imani's voice was like ice. Then you better prepare for the hardest journey of your life. And she turned, but Liam lingered, just for a second. He looked back at the man who claimed to be his father, the man who now had tears in his eyes. The boy's voice was small. Are you really my dad? Grayson choked out. I think so, son. I think so. Imani said nothing, just tightened her grip on Liam's hand and walked away. Grayson didn't chase. He simply stood there, in the middle of the street, alone, broken, staring at the faces he would never forget again. The street had never been quieter. Grayson Wolfe, the man who once towered over empires, was now on his knees, his designer slacks pressing into cold pavement, while stunned bystanders murmured behind camera phones. But he didn't hear them. All he saw was her. All he felt was him, the little boy with his eyes and her fire, standing behind the wall of a mother who had raised him alone. Grayson raised his hands in surrender. Please, he choked. Please, Imani. She held Liam tightly, her jaw trembling. Her eyes, brown as rich earth and just as deep, were lined with tears that refused to fall. Grayson swallowed hard. Liam is my son. I know it now. And I also know I betrayed you. Imani's lips quivered. I was blind, foolish, afraid. he continued. When you told me you were pregnant, I shut down. Not because I didn't care, but because I did, and that terrified me. She blinked. Terrified you. Her voice was razor-sharp. I begged you to listen, and you hung up. I sent my mother to you, and you threw her out like trash. I sat alone, pregnant and scared, in a beach house we picked out together, and you never came. Grayson winced. Imani took a deep breath, steadying herself. And now, she said, her voice breaking, you slap your own son in the street like a stranger. The words sliced him open. She stepped closer, fury in her footsteps. You're not a man, Grayson, she spat. You're a price tag with no soul, a walking wallet who thinks he can patch up betrayal with guilt. Grayson's mouth trembled. You're right. That caught her off guard. I am all those things, he said, and I hate it. I've hated myself every day since I saw you again, since I saw him, since I saw what I lost, what you protected. Alone, he looked at Liam. I didn't know what love was until I saw him, until I saw you. Again. Imani's lip trembled, but she didn't respond. Grayson finally dropped lower, placing both palms on the ground, like a man praying. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm begging for a chance, just to prove I'm not that man anymore. Liam whispered, Mum, why is he crying? Imani looked down at the broken man before her. The same man who once held her waist during slow dances, who traced her fingers with promises of forever, now kneeling in shame. And it wasn't the posture that cracked her. It was the truth in his voice, the regret, the rawness, the pain. She looked away, trying to protect herself from the part of her heart that still remembered love. You think one apology makes up for years? She asked quietly. No, he whispered. But I'll spend years making up for it. A tear finally escaped her eye. You don't deserve him, she whispered. I know. You don't deserve me. I don't, he said. But I'll earn it. I'll earn both of you. One breath at a time. For a moment they stood in silence, the storm between them still wild, but the winds were shifting. Liam looked up at his mother. Mum, can we go now? He asked softly. Imani nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, baby. As she turned to leave, Grayson didn't stop them. He didn't beg further. He simply bowed his head, letting his tears fall onto the pavement, soaking into the concrete like confession. But just before they disappeared down the sidewalk, Liam did something unexpected. He looked back. Sir, he called out softly. Grayson lifted his head. Liam walked back to him, just a few steps, and pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was a small, crumpled paper drawing, a stick figure of a boy holding hands with a taller man. Above them it said, Maybe one day. Grayson's heart cracked. He reached out with shaking hands and took the paper, holding it like sacred scripture. I'll frame it, he whispered, smiling through tears. Liam gave a shy nod, then ran back to his mum. Imani looked at her son, then back at Grayson, and though her heart still ached and her wounds still bled, something flickered behind her eyes. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a possibility. A door slightly ajar. And Grayson Wolfe, once a king of coldness, was finally learning how to kneel. Change doesn't come overnight. It doesn't walk in wearing designer suits or charm its way back with roses. It crawls, it bleeds, it begs for grace without demanding it. And Grayson Wolfe began to change. The very next morning after the street incident, headlines were splashed across news outlets. Millionaire CEO assaults child outside headquarters. Sources say child might be his own. His PR team panicked. Board members urged silence. Legal suggested a payout. But Grayson shut his office door and turned everything off. No press, no spin, no excuses. Instead, he called his driver, skipped his meetings, and went straight to the Hope shelter, the one Imani used to support with her tips from the canteen. He stood in the dusty courtyard, surrounded by kids who didn't care about his last name, his bank account, or the luxury brand of his watch. He gave the shelter a donation of $2 million, but this time he didn't ask for a press release. He asked for a list of single mothers struggling to make ends meet. He read their names, their stories. Their silent strength reminded him of her. He created the Imani Hope Fund, dedicated to single mothers who raised warriors without a man by their side. He didn't tell Imani. Not yet. Every Friday, he visited local soup kitchens, sleeves rolled up, stirring pots and serving food. No photos, no cameras, only people. He even found the disabled homeless woman Imani once helped, the same woman from the road that started it all. Grayson paid for her physical therapy, a new apartment, and part-time care. "She's an angel, that girl," the woman said to him, unaware he already knew. Grayson smiled quietly. He never said her name, just listened and worked and changed. Meanwhile, Imani Brooks, who once stormed out of his mansion humiliated, got a visit from Grayson 2 months later, this time with no security and no arrogance. He arrived with Liam's favorite comic books, a bouquet of sunflowers, and trembling hands. She opened the door. Silence stretched. Grayson looked down. "Ms. Brooks, I owe you more than I could ever repay." Darlene didn't soften immediately. She crossed her arms, watching him like a hawk. "You finally learned how to knock instead of shout," she said dryly. Grayson chuckled nervously. "I've learned a few things, and I'd like to learn more. From you, from Liam, from Imani, if she ever lets me." Darlene narrowed her eyes. "Actions, Grayson," she said. "You don't earn your way back with flowers." "I know," he replied. "That's why I started with diapers." He handed her a receipt. Thousands of dollars in donations made to local community groups for single mothers, all in Imani's name. Darlene blinked. She still didn't smile, but she opened the door wider. "You can stay for tea," she said. That was enough for him. Imani, meanwhile, was still cautious. Her guard was high. Her heart was in lockdown. But she noticed things. Liam's new sneakers, exactly his size. The monthly deliveries of groceries to their building, paid anonymously. The extra funding her community center suddenly received, marked with a note. "For the iron ladies who never broke, only bent." Imani knew who it was. And still, she said nothing. She wanted proof, not gestures, consistency. And she got it. She spotted him once, hiding behind a pillar at Liam's school play, disguised in a hoodie and sunglasses, clapping with tears in his eyes when Liam said his one line, "I'm brave like my mummy." She said nothing. But that night, she smiled when Liam said, "There was a weird man crying in the back row." Weeks passed, then months, and one quiet evening, Grayson knocked again, this time with a request, not a promise. "I want to take Liam to the zoo," he said. "Just the two of us. If you'll let me." Imani paused, then nodded slowly. "He needs a coat. It'll be cold." Her voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold anymore either. It was something in between. Grayson smiled. "I bought one, just in case." The zoo trip was magical. Grayson held Liam's hand the whole time, pointing out animals, answering endless questions, buying ice cream, carrying him on his shoulders. They laughed. They bonded. They became father and son in a way money could never buy. That night, when he dropped Liam home, Imani stood at the door, arms crossed. Liam jumped into her embrace. "Mommy, we saw lions, but Daddy's scared of monkeys." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Daddy, huh?" Grayson turned pale. She looked at him. "Did you tell him to call you that?" "No," he said softly. "He just did." Her eyes softened, only a little. Weeks later, they began having family dinners, at first with Darlene present. Then, just the three of them. Imani was still reserved. Her heart had scars. But Grayson never pushed. He only showed up, consistently, humbly. One night, while washing dishes, he quietly asked, "Do you still listen to jazz?" Imani nodded. "Sometimes. I'd like to take you out, just once, no promises, just music." She hesitated, then said, "We'll see." Grayson smiled. "That's all I need." In the world's eyes, he was a reformed CEO. But to Grayson, he wasn't rebuilding a brand. He was rebuilding a life. He traded nightclubs for storybooks, meetings for parent-teacher conferences, empty parties for dinners that ended with Liam asleep in his arms. He changed. But the cost of redemption wasn't money. It was humility. It was time. It was waiting for Imani to open a heart she had every right to keep locked. One late evening, Imani stood at the window, watching Liam sleep peacefully, snuggled up with a toy lion. Behind her, Grayson stood quietly. She spoke without turning. "He's happy. Because of you." Grayson swallowed hard. "Because of you. I'm just late to the party." Imani turned slowly, her eyes no longer guarded, no longer furious, just searching. "You're not in my heart yet, Grayson," she said honestly. "I know," he whispered, "but may I stay near the door until you're ready?" Her silence was a soft yes, and that was enough for now. The morning was calm. No media vans, no champagne towers, no lavish hotel rooms or velvet carpets. Just a soft breeze, golden sunlight, and the scent of fresh earth. Imani Brooks stood at the gates of something unexpected. Not a mansion, not an apology wrapped in gold, but a house. Modest, modern, built with earth tones and glass walls that welcomed the sunrise. A home. Beside it, a sign read, "The Brooks Shelter for Single Mothers, Rising Strong." Tears welled in Imani's eyes before a single word was spoken. Behind her, footsteps approached, steady, nervous, unguarded. Grayson Wolfe. Gone was the cold billionaire. He now wore jeans, a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, and humility like a second skin. "I didn't bring a ring," he said, his voice quiet, "because rings can shine without meaning." She turned. He handed her a small envelope. Inside it, a letter, handwritten. His penmanship wasn't perfect, but every word was. "Imani, you once called yourself an iron lady, but you're more than that. You are warmth in a winter world. I wanted to build you a kingdom, but I realized you were never meant to live in a castle. You were meant to lead a village. So I built this, a home, beside a shelter, because your heart isn't for one. It's for many. This isn't to erase my past. It's to honor yours. I won't ask for forgiveness. Only a chance to keep becoming the man you once believed I could be. If you say yes, I promise to never walk ahead of you again. Only beside you. Always beside you. Grayson." Imani read the letter again, this time with trembling hands. "I don't need diamonds," she said, eyes misty. "I need stability, honesty, real love. You built that." Grayson dropped to his knees, not in grandeur, but in surrender. "I'm not proposing with a ring. I'm proposing with a foundation. This home, this shelter, and a life where you and Liam come first. Not profit, not status, not ego." Imani exhaled slowly. Her heart had healed with scars, but it had healed. She reached out, took his hands, and said, "Yes." The wedding was small, held in the garden of their new home. Liam, dressed in a tiny cream-colored suit, held the pillow with the ring. A simple band, carved with a single word: always. Darlene wept through the entire ceremony, tears of joy, of pride, of release. The community gathered, women from the shelter among them, cheering as Imani walked down the aisle, barefoot, in a soft champagne gown, holding a bouquet made by the shelter kids. Grayson waited, eyes glistening. When she reached him, he whispered, "You brought me to life." She smiled. "You found your soul." They said their vows under a willow tree. No pomp, no show, just promises. Real ones. Later that night, after laughter, dancing, and Liam falling asleep mid-snore, Grayson and Imani stood alone on the porch. The stars above sparkled gently. "I used to think I was rich," he said, pulling her close. She leaned into him. "Now?" He kissed her forehead. "Now I'm finally wealthy." She rested her hand on his chest. "Because of me?" He smiled. "Because of us." They looked out at the shelter next door, its porch lit by soft lanterns, a group of single mothers sitting in a circle, sipping tea, laughing together, children playing nearby. "I want Liam to grow up seeing this," Imani said, "seeing what redemption looks like." "He will," Grayson replied. "He already is." As the moon rose, Grayson held her tighter. "You know what I love most about you?" he asked. "What?" "You didn't just change my heart, you rewrote my legacy." She smiled through tears. "You taught me how to be human." Final message to society. In a world where wealth is often loud and love is too often quiet, let this story remind us: the richest man isn't the one who owns the world, it's the one who rebuilds himself for the people he loves. That true beauty is in kindness, and that a strong woman can birth not just a child, but a man's better self. From betrayal to redemption, from pain to purpose, love, loyalty, and courage are the true currency of life. So, if you're ever broken, know this: ashes are where homes are built. And love, real love, deserves a second chance.